How's it going, YouTube? As always, I hope you're having a great week. This video we're going to call worship, okay? You know, when you think of worship, what do you think of? Do you think of, maybe being in a church and singing songs or hymns, right? What if I told you that's not really worship? Singing and praising God, that's more of an overflow of worship in your life. That's a result of worship in your life, but it's not really worship. It's what can happen. Okay? And we kind of get confused about some of them things. We think, hey, I go to church, I've seen some songs, and I worshiped. But that, like I said, that's not really worship. In the same way, Jesus comes to the well to get water. And there's a Samaritan woman there. And he talks to her, and he's speaking about, how you come to get water here every day, and because you need it to sustain your life. But if you drink the water I give you, you'll never thirst again. And she starts to realize that he's talking about the Messiah and being saved, right? And she says, well, my people worship on this mountain, but the Jews say we're supposed to worship in Jerusalem. She basically believes it's an action that she does. That's what worship was. And Jesus has to correct her. And he says this in John 4:23. But the hour is come, and now is. When the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. You see, she thought it was action or a place you went and did something. But Jesus is saying, you know what? True worshipers are going to worship God in spirit and in truth. What does that mean? It means their life, their entire being will be found in him. And their whole trust and faith for what they, walk and breathe the next breath will be in him. And it will be true. Many times people look at salvation the same way. They think, man, I've said some words, so I'm saved. Good. We're good. No big deal. But they keep coming back to the feeling that they got to get saved again. Partially because of a lot of things they've done in their life since then. Choices they've made daily, probably. It might be because of the simple fact that they go to church maybe on Sunday and sing some songs and listen to a message, but the rest of the week has nothing to do with God. They've taken this little part of their week, an hour or two, and said, this is for God and everything else is for me. But they believe they're saved because they've said some words. But see, that's not what salvation is. It's not from anything I've done. Don't get me wrong. It's completely by what Jesus Christ did on the cross and dying for my sins and him paying for my sins. Okay? If I had to do anything to add to it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So it's good that it's only because of what he's done. Because aside from that, I wouldn't be worthy. I wouldn't be capable. But either way, I have to accept it. And what that means is having a relationship with God, having a relationship with Jesus Christ, putting my whole faith and trust in his hands. And see, when I do that, it's reflected in how I live my life. Because he lives inside me. You see how people have a hard time realizing or thinking they need to get saved again? It's because they never really put their faith and trust in God's hands. They never really wanted to be saved. They just wanted to feel better. Worship, when it comes down to it, it's not singing songs. You might go to a Southern Baptist church. They might say, oh, playing them instruments and all that, that's not worship. Or you might go to a newer type of church, and they might say, them hymns ain't worship. But the truth is, neither of them are really worship. It's supposed to be an overflow of God in your life. Of the fact that you worship God. And the fact that your entire spirit is in his hands. And it's true. Just as Jesus says here. They'll worship God, the Father, in spirit and in truth. So what is true in your life? Have you put your faith and trust in him? You know, I know people are going to get mad at me about it. I say that singing songs is not really worship. But you know, if God lives inside me, overflow of my love for him and him being inside me is what drives me to sing. Some of the days I've probably had the most greatest, I guess, song in my heart, if you will, are days that probably one-on-one I spent with him, reading his word and praying and speaking with him. And it turned to overflow in singing, right? And other stuff. But it also turns into overflow in the way I live my life and how I love others, the way that God loved me. Not just the ones that love me, but the ones that hate me, the ones that despise me, and how I love them, right? That's worship too. Worship, you know, singing songs is great, man. It can get you in a place when you're having a bad day. It can lift your spirit. But it comes down to the one-on-one relationship with God that'll really touch your life and give you a song to sing, right? You know, when we talk about worship, we think sometimes about, you know, the Bible says in the Ten Commandments, don't worship false idols, right? And many times we can have other things that mean more to us in our life than God. And that's what we worship. I'll give you an example. Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, right? And they crossed the Red Sea and all this. And then they come to Mount Sinai. And he says, I'm going to go up on the mountain. I'm going to speak to God for you. And he leaves and goes up on the mountain. And I think they put their entire faith and trust in Moses because he had freed them from slavery pretty much, you know? I mean, that's who they saw, even though God was the one he's saying is doing it, right? And the minute Moses is gone, and gone for a little bit, they're like, oh, Moses is dead. What are we going to do? We've lost what our faith is in. Make us a calf. Make us a golden calf that we can worship, that it will guide us. It will take care of us and watch over us and protect us. They started worshiping something else. Right? Because when it come down to it, yeah, they were led out of Egypt by God. But they didn't really put their faith and trust in him. Otherwise, they wouldn't so easily have gone after something else to worship. Right? In many ways, them 40 years in the desert, even though they weren't the greatest time, were probably the best thing God did for the Israelite nation. Because it taught them to trust him. Many times in Israel's history, when they were led into captivity because of their sin, it was the best thing that could ever happen to them because it led them back to God. My life, I look at, and some of the worst times in my life are the best because God corrected me and told me, you're not going to go there anymore. You're not going to go that way anymore or any further. You need to turn around and follow me. I look back at my life and you might think, he's crazy, saying that some of the worst times of his life are the times he feels most blessed by God. But if he hadn't done that, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know where I'd be. He loved me enough to correct me. And he loves you enough to correct you too. But sometimes we just refuse to take his correction. And we think, it ain't something good, so I don't want it. But let me tell you something. If you don't take this, it's going to be a lot worse. Yeah, it's great to get what you want, but sometimes it's better off to not. You're more blessed by not getting what you want sometimes. And when we look at, our lives, Are we saved? Have we put our complete faith and trust in God? Do we have a relationship with him? Or is it like, if this pastor, if he falls, am I going to lose my faith? If this person I care about, if I lose them, am I going to lose my faith? If that's the case, you haven't put your complete trust and faith in God. You got your faith, your worship into that person, into that thing, into possessions. They're not going to be able to save you, I'm telling you. So if you worship, I hope you worship in spirit and truth, as Jesus says, because he continues, like I said, and says, the Father is seeking such to worship him. If you worship God, your life will show it. It'll overflow in song and love and caring for others. So do you worship God? Do you worship? Or do you just think you do? I think you gotta ask yourself that. But I hope you worship God because, like I said, the Father is seeking such to worship him. Have a great week.